All right, guys, once again, we're back in the garage, and today we're working on the 94 Honda Civic Hatchback. All right, guys, well, if you haven't seen it already, I did do a little bit of an introductory video, how long I've had this car, what I've used it for, what I've done to it in the past, and some of the stuff that I'd like to do in the future. So in order to get to the future, we need to go ahead and start tearing everything down. So today I want to go in, get most of the interior out, any of the wiring that I'm not planning on keeping or redoing, as well as evaluate some of the body work and figure out where we need to go from there. Then I can start making lists of what parts I need and what tasks I need to complete and how I need to proceed and move forward and get this build back on the road. So let's go ahead and we'll jump into the car and take a look at some of the stuff that we're gonna be pulling out. All right, so we got the interior cleaned out a little bit, but one of the things I do want to do is try to get the doors off. So if I can get the doors off, that'll make it a lot easier to pull the dash, as well as I need to remove these fenders in order to take the doors off. So we'll get both fenders removed and then take both doors off and then get back to the interior. All right, guys, so as you can see, the door is off. I struggled a little bit. What I would do is use the latch on the back side to kind of hold it up while you take off the bolts for the hinges. So there should be two hinges, one on the top, one on the bottom. Each has two bolts, and you're gonna have a plug for wire speakers. In my case, it's just speakers, but you might have, you know, window switches, whatever, and then also a pin for the retention. So I would do the pin and the electrical harness first, make sure it's latched, and then go ahead and remove your hinge bolts, and it should just come right off. It is pretty heavy, so just be prepared. I definitely suggest having a second person, but if you don't, it's still manageable, as you saw, even though I may have struggled a little bit because it's been a while since I took one of these doors off. Let's go ahead and move to the other side and continue this tear down. All right, guys, now that the doors are off, we can go ahead and start attacking some of this wiring under here. Most of this is the ECU harness, the underhood fuse box, or the extra fuse panel that I tried to add here. So maybe in another video, I'll kind of go over the project that I did with this. It worked pretty well, but I never actually used it, so it may not make its way back into the car, and then we can work on getting the rest of the dashboard out. So let's go ahead and dig into that. All right, guys, so you can see the dashboard's out, doors off. Here's the panel that I had in place of the glove box. I actually still had the glove box cover that went over it, so you couldn't tell. Battery relocation box. You can see everything's out of the interior. There's a bunch of these wires are left, but most of this is either the underhood fuse relay or the ECU harness. This long wire is for a battery relocation setup. And that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go through and collect all my hardware, label everything so I know where it goes when it goes back. I've done this a couple times, so I think most of it I can do by recognition, but it's always good to label your parts whenever you take them off, especially hardware. A lot of it looks the same, it might be slightly different, but I'm gonna go ahead and check everything and make sure it's all good and ready to go. And I think this might be a good spot to go ahead and wrap up this video. Alright guys, well we're back in the garage, and before I wrap this video up I just wanted to go over a few things really quickly. Obviously the first thing is the wiring. A lot of question marks have been uncovered by me tearing down the car a lot more, and the wiring seems to be the first thing that I need to address. So one of the things I want to do is use a bulkhead connector and use that to pass through the firewall and make nice clean connections and not have to worry about wires chafing or anything like that. So that's a decision that I had thought about 4 or 5 years ago when I redid the harness in the first place. And I ultimately decided that I wanted to keep it as close to stock as possible. But now, since I don't feel that feeling anymore, I think I'm going to go ahead and do it the way that I wanted to do it in the first place and get everything done that way. So once that wiring harness is done, I think I'm going to move into the engine bay and make sure the engine bay is prepped and ready for everything that I want to do long term. And then I can start putting the engine and transmission back together and back in the car. So those couple of steps will hopefully get me to a point where I have a running driving vehicle. I can pull it in and out of the garage under its own power, and that'll make doing a lot of the other stuff a lot easier. Once I get done with that, I can move into stuff like the exterior and the interior, and then the rest of the mechanical of the car, whether it's suspension or brakes or any of that. So the suspension brakes are already done. A lot of the stuff that I would need to do with those is just a refresh, whether it's cleaning, adjusting, replacing bushings, stuff like that. The exterior obviously needs its own work. There's a lot of rust here, particularly in the rear arches. So I went and ordered over fenders for the front and rear as well as side skirts. And hopefully that'll help me be free to cut out some of that rust and fix some of the other stuff, clean up some of the dents. I think I'm eventually gonna wrap the car, so I'll probably sand it down, get it in the primer, maybe a base coat just to seal everything up, and then go ahead and wrap it. Maybe I'll end up just painting it. I'm not really sure on that yet, but that's well down the road. So like I said, the focus right now is the wiring, and then moving into the engine bay, and then moving into the driveline mechanicals, so we can get all that done and get it running and driving the car. So once it runs and dries, then I can focus on the rest of the car, but that's my short-term goals, is to buy, hopefully, once it starts getting cooler out, maybe the fall, winter, getting it to the point where it's running and driving, and it's not gonna live its entire winter outside. But that's where we're at. So if you like what you saw, if you were enjoying the video, or if you just have some sort of feedback, whether it's a question or a suggestion, feel free to leave me a comment. I do read all the comments and I do my best to reply. But other than that, like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.